Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Lizzie and today we are discussing spoilers, specifically whether the inclusion of LGBTQ plus characters or their identities can be considered a spoiler. I think this goes without saying, this video will include spoilers. Whether you consider everything to be a spoiler or some of them to be a spoiler is kind of what the video is about. But just be aware, there's a list in the description of all of the books and things I'll be talking about. So, you know, if you don't want to know anything about them, then just so you know. This is something I've seen a lot of discussion about on various social media platforms and always kind of read what people have had to say and had my own opinions. And I started thinking about it more recently when in a Facebook group I'm in, someone asked, in The 7 Husbands of Evelyn and Hugo, is there any LGBTQ plus representation? And I went to comment to tell them what was in the book. And one of the comments I saw said, not to spoil the book, but there's L and G representation. So bisexual erasure aside, I thought it was interesting that the commenter had, when answering a direct question about the contents of the book, had said that it might be considered a spoiler. So I did respond saying, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that there's a bisexual main character, because I don't think it's a spoiler to say that. And, you know, this was very amiable, it wasn't a internet argument. The response was, oh, well, I have friends who will not read a book if they know anything about it. They want to go in completely blind. And that got me thinking, because the knowledge that Evelyn Hugo was a bisexual character is what persuaded me to read the book. When the book came out and it was so hyped and everyone was raving about it, I remember being like, I mean, I'm sure it's good, but I don't know if it's my thing. It's, you know, I don't know. I've got other things I want to read. I'll concentrate on those. And then I saw it being featured in a list of books with bisexual characters, and I was like, sold. That sounds right up my alley. I'll read it. So, is it a spoiler? That is hopefully what I'm going to be discussing today. I, of course, have my opinions. You, of course, have your opinions. So, hear me out, and then let's have a polite discussion in the comments. First of all, though, I think it's crucial to remember when we're discussing what does and doesn't constitute a spoiler, that everyone has a different idea of what a spoiler is, as is evident in that example of me and this other person on Facebook having completely different ideas of what constitutes a spoiler. And there are people who prefer to go into a book completely blind, knowing nothing, which I appreciate sometimes not knowing too much about the story, because then you can experience it all for the first time. But surely you want to know that the genre is your thing, you know? I don't know. I just don't understand that complete blind going into a book as a sort of preferred method. How do you choose a book at a bookshop? But that's a whole other rant from me, which we're not going to get into. Everyone has different ideas of what a spoiler is, and that is, of course, going to colour the argument that we have here. That being said, I don't think that saying the identity of characters in the book is ever going to be a spoiler. In the same way that if I said, hey, this book is about a group of women, or this book is about a family, or this book is about a couple, you could also say, this book is about a gay man, this book is about an intersex person, in the same way that you might describe someone's culture or any part of their identity that is part of the story and part of who they are. Of course, it's not always that simple, but I personally think that knowing that there are queer characters in a book, sometimes, you know, if someone recommends something to you and they say, okay, to tell you what would be a spoiler, but there are queer characters, there are queer themes, that's not a spoiler, that's an added recommendation in my book. When you recommend a book to someone, you want to tell them the reasons why you think they would enjoy it, right? So surely if you know that the person reading it is looking for those things, you would mention them. Going back to The 7 Husbands of Evelyn and Hugo, I have bought it or recommended it to many friends who are queer women, and every single time I will say, this book is really, really good. I know the title makes it look really straight, but it's not. And, you know, because that's what I know they're looking for. That's what I know they want to read. So for me to be like, you should read this book, but I'm not going to tell you why, they're not going to read it. I don't read books when people say that. I read books when I know there's something I'm going to enjoy in it, something I'm going to look for, something I'm going to relate to or learn from or feel immersed in. So knowing that those characters and themes are in a story is never a spoiler for me. For many people, of course, that's not the case. Whether or not there are queer characters or storylines isn't something that influences their decision to pick up a book. So surely it doesn't matter if it's spoiled. It's not a spoiler. It's not a spoiler. If you would have read the book either way, it's not a spoiler. Except for maybe a few specific cases. For me, a spoiler is about the storyline. And if the storyline involves certain characters or things going on, that could be considered a spoiler. For me, it's the storyline that is the spoiler, not the characters. So if a character's storyline relates to their queerness, typically a coming out storyline, then I could see how that could constitute a spoiler. And to be fair, I have avoided spoilers in this instance in the past. It's not a book, but the one that springs to mind is Brooklyn Nine-Nine. In the episode where Rosa came out, I remember just like, I absentmindedly opened Twitter or Instagram the morning after the episode aired. I hadn't watched it yet because I'm in the UK, and seeing people tweeting about it and Stephanie Beatrice tweeting about it, and immediately being like, no, I don't want spoilers, I need to go watch the episode. But I think there's a couple of things going on there. It's an ongoing media form, you know, a TV show where there's a new instalment every week. Then you want to experience that instalment for yourself first, because you and all the other fans are on the same page. Now that the whole show has aired, and if I were recommending it to someone who I knew was looking for TV shows with queer characters, I would probably say that in season 5, then one of the characters has a coming out storyline, and that it was based on the actor's experiences and that she contributed to it. In fact, I think I've said those exact words to people like last week. You know, now that the whole thing is complete and I'm not experiencing it for the first time, and anyone watching it is watching it as a whole rather than in that episodic format, I wouldn't consider it a spoiler if I knew that that's something they were looking for in a show. If you really wanted to, you might not say who was coming out if you considered that to be a spoiler, but I don't think it's not a spoiler. It's not a spoiler. Storylines are as much a reason why we consume the fiction we do as the characters themselves. So if it's relevant, it's great to bring up the storylines that you think someone you're recommending something to would be interested in. There is a trope among all sorts of fiction where it's a bit of a twist that a character comes out or is outed, and that is often harmful, not always, but is often harmful, and I'm not going to go into that here. There is a very good video by Lindsay Ellis on how that specifically affects the trans community and trans representation, which I will link in the description. And maybe one day I'll do a video on that trope and its different like manifestations. But there were a couple of things I just wanted to mention here. So I guess you could say that Evelyn and Hugo fits into that trope, because it's quite a way into the book that we have this sort of reveal that the true love of her life was a woman. I can imagine that, especially for a straight reader, that would feel like a twist and a reveal as to who she really is. And I could see why there is confusion as to whether or not it's a spoiler to say that she is a bisexual character. Another one I did want to mention with regards to the kind of trope of that is The Absolutist by John Boyne, where it's made pretty obvious but never stated clearly that the two main characters, who are both male, are in a relationship or have a romantic entanglement, an affair of sorts. It's teased that there's a big reveal coming. We know there's a big reveal coming, and we think we know what that reveal is going to be because we've seen this trope over and over again of queerness being used as a twist. But that is not the twist. There is a whole other twist that you're not expecting because you've kind of been led down this rabbit hole because we've come to expect queerness as being a surprise reveal that would be considered a spoiler. It's such a good way of subverting that trope and definitely sort of leading you in the wrong direction. So all of that to say that someone being queer isn't a spoiler. That's the basic, boiled down version of it. I would say a character being queer, the existence of queer storylines is not in and of itself a spoiler. I think a good example of this would be Reid in the Shades of Magic series. I don't think it would be a spoiler to say that he is a queer character. I think it would be a spoiler to say who he has had romantic entanglements with in the past, because that is more of a reveal and is more important to the plot in terms of who that person is. But I think to say that he's a queer character wouldn't be a spoiler at all, because it's who he is, it's part of his character. And, that might persuade someone to read the book, which is always good. But let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think that talking about the LGBTQ storylines in a book or a TV show, is it a spoiler? Does it depend on the piece of media itself? Are different formats different? Is an episodic TV show different from a film that's complete and done and dusted? I don't think there is one simple answer, and let me know what you think. If you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like, and I will see you next time. Ta-ra for now.